Viridian, The Green Guide. By Clouds. My Head in the Clouds Not Coming Down. Read by Oak Shadow 5. Chapter 83. Battle. Summary. I am so excited about this chapter. And next chapter. Dude, Sarah pleaded. If you know what we're doing this afternoon, just tell us. Denki grinned widely. Sorry, cross my heart and hope to die. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, but I will warn you that you're all about to lose your minds. Ah, Mina sobbed. I swear, this is worse than not having any hands at all. Dance probably doesn't know shit. Bakugo scoffed from across the room. He's just messing with you. I'm not, Denki pouted. Okay, maybe I am having fun, but that's not manly, dude, Kirishima complained. If Bakugo's right and you don't know anything, Mina warned. Everybody shut up, Jiro yelled. The teacher's coming. Denki smiled knowingly and watched his classmates' reactions as the door slammed open and All Might, the All Might, came into the room and struck a pose. I am here to be your teacher. The class exploded into excited yells as Denki chuckled. Told you you'd lose your minds. You knew? Kirishima's eyes bugged out of his head. All Might is so manly, dude. Thank you for the compliment, young man. All Might laughed loudly. But enough about me. This is about you, the next promising generation of young heroes. To be heroes, however, you have to look the part. He pressed a remote and a section of the wall slid away, revealing a collection of briefcases labeled with their student numbers. Denki couldn't hold back a gasp, and he wasn't the only one. Are those our costumes? Hagakure yelled. So cool! Hurry and get dressed, then meet me at practice ground better, Ahmed instructed. Let's see what you can do. Denki didn't waste any time getting dressed. He and Izuku had designed his costume together, and they'd both decided to keep it simple and practical, so that it wouldn't get in his way while he fought. Denki would have loved to stay and gawk at all the other guys' awesome costumes, but he figured he'd have time to do that later while they fought, and he didn't know when he'd get another opportunity to really talk to All Might. He knew that he'd give him his number, but it just felt so wrong to casually text the number one hero. Hey, I looked over the information, and I know it's probably dangerous, but decided I want to accept your quirk and become the next symbol of peace anyway. Cool? Thankfully, when he got out of the dressing rooms, All Might was the only person there. When he caught sight of Denki, he grinned. Young Kaminari, you look like a hero. Thanks. Denki bounced up to him and smiled. It feels so weird, you know. I've wanted to be a hero for so long, and now it's actually happening. Well, you deserve it. I'm sure you'll do well. All Might ruffled his hair. How have you been? I'm sure you didn't have time to look over all the information I gave you, as there was quite a bit. Actually, I read it all last night. Denki corrected quickly. Sorry, was I not supposed to? It's just that it was easier to get it all done in one go. If I'd split it up, I was scared that I'd forget about it, or... All Might laughed. Don't worry, my boy. There's nothing wrong with being eager. It just surprised me is all. So, what did you think? He looked nervous, and Denki got why. Well, there are some risks, obviously, but, well, there's risks to being a hero too, right? All Might nodded sadly. Yes, my boy. Yes, there is. Denki took a deep breath. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'd like to accept, if the offer is still there. Is that all right? Are you sure? All Might's eyes were wide, and he still looked nervous, but Denki could tell he was excited too. I'm not going to judge you or treat you differently if you decide to reject the offer. I know, Denki said. But if this will help me be a better hero, I don't want to say no. All Might smiled gently. Very well. I'm proud of you, young Kaminari. He reached up and plucked a piece of hair from his head. Eat this. Denki took a step back. What? Well, All Might rubbed the back of his neck. The Quirk Transfer has to happen through ingesting DNA, so... Oh. Denki thought back to what Izuku had told him. Quirks were a part of a person's DNA, so that made sense, and Izuku was always doing with quirk experiments, and he usually went along with those, so this wasn't too different, right? Okay. All Might gave him a smile, and Denki returned it hesitantly. Eating their hair obviously wasn't comfortable, but it also probably wasn't the weirdest thing he'd ever eaten, so Denki just decided he wouldn't think about it too much. He wasn't sure what getting another quirk was supposed to feel like, and it wasn't like Izuku would know either, so he couldn't have asked him, but still, he'd expected something. After about a minute of sitting there awkwardly, he spoke up. "Am I supposed to feel any different? Did it work?" "Oh, it worked," Ahmed assured him. "But you might not notice the power until you try to use it." Okay." Denki heard the door opening and turned to see the rest of his classmates making their way toward them. Now that he was starting to think things through, he was realizing that maybe he shouldn't have impulsively chosen to receive One for All right before a combat exercise. Katsuki's entire worldview had just been flipped on its head more ways than one, and yet, here he was, expected to go to class like everything was completely normal. First of all, Izuku Midoriya, the weak, quirkless Deku he'd bullied for years, had gone vigilante behind his back. That would be shocking enough, but apparently he was really fucking good at it? Katsuki took back everything he'd ever said about Izuku not being able to be a hero, because when he'd gotten home, he'd looked up every video he could find of Viridian fighting. Sure, they were all shaky phone camera videos, but now that he knew who he was looking at, he could see it. The nerd never used a quirk and never gave up, which was what made it so frustrating that he'd rejected his apology. If Izuku had rejected it because he didn't forgive him, that would be one thing. Katsuki expected that. But outright saying he didn't think he deserved an apology and trying to pass off what Katsuki did as normal or accepted? Bullshit! But then again, there wasn't anything he could do. He didn't have any right to tell Izuku what to be, not anymore. But, because learning that the kid he'd assumed was a weakling his whole life was actually a badass wasn't enough of a shock to his system, he also had to learn, from said weakling, that pretty much everything he knew about quirks was wrong. He was definitely going to be confronting Amplifier about that. She'd mentioned that something wonky was going on with Ogawa's quirk, but multiple quirks? Seriously? He just kept thinking about how much Ogawa's quirk had changed. What about the people whose quirks had been combined with? Were they out somewhere, quirkless now? What about their families? He shook his head and pulled on his gauntlets. He'd ended up going with a slimmer design, rather than the one he'd drawn up as a kid. He was probably going to be more active on the streets at night, working to stop criminals from the shadows rather than trying to be on the 5 o'clock news every day, so having giant grenades on his wrists wasn't really practical. The ones he'd gone with didn't have as much carrying capacity, but if he was working in an urban setting, massive blasts would just cause collateral damage and noise complaints, and these ones wouldn't get in the way. His entire costume was designed to be able to blend into the shadows and alleyways he'd grown to feel at home in these past few months. Most of what he wore was black, but he had dark orange accents across the chest and on his gauntlets. He'd also gone with a practical mask, and he'd asked the support company to design his headpiece so it enhanced his hearing. Overall, he thought he looked awesome, and he was ready for a fight. Dumb Hair and his band of extras seemed to agree, because both Kirishima and Zero complimented his outfit as they were all getting dressed. Dancers had hurried out, for some reason, but everyone else was taking their time to revel in the moment as they got dressed in their hero costumes for the first time. All Might made sure they all knew how good they looked when they came out and joined Kaminari. "You all look like amazing heroes. Japan is in good hands." Pretty much everyone exchanged proud smiles, and Katsuki rolled his eyes. He was ready to fight and train already. He was probably starting to sound way too much like Aizawa, but what was the point of meaningless ceremonies when there were people to save? "For your first hero class, I thought a good old-fashioned game of heroes versus villains would be fitting," Ahmed announced. "I will be assigning teams randomly and giving everyone a role for 2-on-2 indoor battles. Let's begin." There was a nervous energy that buzzed through the room as the teams were decided and announced. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. Uraraka might look sweet, but he was pretty sure those pink cheeks were hiding something, so he wasn't about to underestimate her. Pairing her with Inasa was probably the worst thing that could happen, since they could probably make the entire imaginary a battle. It wouldn't be too bad for Katsuki. His explosions could propel him well enough that he could figure it out. But he was paired with Ida. Ida's quirk was literally engine. He was like a car. If Cheeks and Tornado over there decided to take to the air, they could dive bomb him and he wouldn't be able to do a thing about it. And to make matters worse, they were the villains, not the heroes, so they had to worry about defending their weapon on top of everything else. This was gonna be fun. "Hello, Bakugo." Ida was stiff as they walked to the building. It is a pleasure to work with you. I was thinking you should stay with the weapon while I go after... That's a dumb plan for us. Katsuki cut him off. I'll go after the heroes. You stay with the weapon. Ida spluttered. Bakugo, I really don't think this is the time to be showing off and hogging... Katsuki turned on him. I'm not a fucking show-off, alright? It's just logic. What are you gonna do if they come at you from a window, huh? Or if they stay up near the ceiling and you can't reach them? What are you gonna do then? I can use my explosions to get up there and play if they change the board, but you're earthbound. We need to find the smallest room with the lowest ceilings we can find, preferably with no windows. Do you think this place is a basement? Denki watched Bakugo and Ida enter the building, but he didn't really see any of it. Ahmed had said he wouldn't feel any difference until he actually called on One for All at the first time, but he'd been wrong. Maybe it was just all in his head, but now that it had been a few minutes, he felt like his entire body was buzzing with nervous energy, and he didn't even know what to do with it. He wanted to get up and move, but all he could do was nervously fidget with one of the metal rings he'd requested to be sewn onto his costume, so he'd always have something to play with. He almost felt like he was already at his limit and was about to short out at any second. It was like someone had taken his normal energy, ramped it up to 11, and then kept going. If this was just his electricity, then he'd know how to deal with that, but... Denki's train of thought derailed. In a way, this was his energy, wasn't it? Sure, it was from One for All, not from electricity, but hadn't Izuku mentioned that quirks sometimes mixed when they were transferred? Wasn't that what One for All really kinda was anyway? He knew how to deal with his electricity. He'd been doing it for years, so if he just treated One for All like he treated his electricity, then, even if it didn't work, did he really have anything to lose by trying? Carefully, he took a deep breath and let the buzzing spread out through his body, trying to keep the static and sparkling to a minimum, though based on the way Mina's hair frizzed up beside him, he wasn't entirely successful. He grinned apologetically when she glared at him, but kept sitting with his energy until it evened out enough that he could actually think again. This was gonna take a lot of getting used to. Your preparation time is over, Ahmed announced. Heroes, you may enter the building. Ida didn't know how to feel about Bakugo. On the one hand, he was brash and uncouth, but on the other, he did seem to have the makings of a good hero. When he had insisted on Ida staying behind to guard the weapon, he had assumed that he was doing so to show off, or even just to have more chances to punch something. But then Bakugo had surprised him by pointing out that with Inasa's and Uraraka's quirks, his lack of flight ability would be a hindrance that his speed would not be able to overcome. It was frustrating, but luckily they had come up with a plan to use the environment to their advantage. Thankfully, the building did end up having a basement, accessed through a trapdoor on the ground floor, so the first thing they did was carry the weapon down there and place it in a closed room with no windows, blocking all the vents just to be safe. They turned off most of the lights as an extra precaution, after Bakugo pointed out that if they hadn't known about the basement, their opponents probably didn't as well, so they should make it look as uninhabited as possible, just in case they found it. As soon as Bakugo left to go patrol the halls, Ida started locking away any loose items that Uraraka could use as ammo for her quirk. The heroes might waste the entire time on a wild goose chase upstairs, but if they came down, he would be ready to fight them. Ochako couldn't help but be infected by Inasa's energy as they sat outside the building. He was really loud, but so passionate about everything, especially hero work, and he was pretty powerful, at least according to the quirk assessment yesterday. Fighting Ida and Bakugo would probably be challenging, but she liked their chances. Alright, Inasa grinned as Ahmed announced the beginning of the match. I can use my wind to canine sense obstacles, so finding this weapon should be a piece of cake. Awesome! Ochako pumped her fist, ready to fight as soon as Inasa's winds found the weapon. They would probably send Ida out to counter them and have Bakugo guard the weapon, which was doable. As long as she could trip Ida up long enough for her to touch him, she'd be able to restrain him. It wouldn't be easy, but this was a hero course, so why would it be? It had been a few seconds now, and Inasa still hadn't said anything about the weapon. Ochako looked over to see Inasa frowning in confusion. Inasa? Is something wrong? I can't find it. Inasa turned to her. The building's completely empty. What? Ochako frowned. Is that allowed? I think they have to keep the weapon in the building, Inasa said. But I'm pretty sure Bakugo's on the roof. Let's go confront him. Yeah. Ochako stepped toward the door, only to hear Inasa laughing. What? There's an easier way up, he teased. Don't you have an anti-gravity quirk? Well, Ochako blushed. I can't really use it on myself. Inasa grinned. That's alright, I'll give you a lift then. Ochako's stomach dropped as a strong breeze lifted her into the air. The wind roared around them, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating, but it only lasted a few seconds before she was dropped gently on the roof. Okay, that was awesome! I know, right? Inasa smiled. Flying is the best feeling in the world. Meh, it's alright. Bakugo's voice came from the doorway, and both Ochako and Inasa lowered into battle stances as he emerged from the shadows, looking every bit the villain he was supposed to be playing for the exercise. But have you tried arson? I don't know, setting shit on fire is pretty fun. Of course he would say that, Inasa laughed. Where's the bomb? Bakugo cracked his neck. Right here, tornado. He charged, launching an explosion right at Inasa's face, and when Inasa used the wind to carry him upward and dodge the blast, Bakugo didn't even hesitate to follow him into the sky. Ochako's jaw dropped. How many people in this class could fly? Uraraka, go find the weapon, Inasa ordered. I can handle the sky. Sure, cheeks, you can go ahead and try, Bakugo sneered. But I doubt you find Ida before you get rid of this extra. Inasa laughed. That's what I like to see. Let's fight. Whoa, Kishima whistled. Those two are pretty manly. Deki nodded in agreement. Watching those two duke it out above the building was really cool, especially because their feet never even touched the ground. They'd all thought it was weird when Bakugo went after the heroes instead of Ida, but now it made sense. Even if it hadn't been super smart, it still would have been fun to watch. Ida was busy patrolling in the basement and basically minimizing airflow and loose objects, while Uraraka was now on her second round of the building, getting more and more confused the longer she didn't find anything, especially since half the time was gone now. The fight between Bakugo and Inasa was also heating up, and there had been several close calls already. Is it just me, or does Inasa seem to be losing it? Jira asked. It's the heat, Todoroki said. The explosions are causing heat pockets in the air and making it act unpredictably, which makes it harder for Inasa to control. Todoroki's right, Yarurozo agreed. If Inasa stays in the air, he's actually going to be at a disadvantage, despite his quirk. Denki turned his attention back to the screen, just in time to see Bakugo launch a final explosion at Inasa's back and throw him onto the roof, smirking as he wrapped him up in the capture tape. The entire class stared in shocked silence for a moment before they all burst. That was such a dirty move, Mineta yelled. Hitting him for the back like that? He is playing a villain, Tsu pointed out. Even if he wasn't, it's still a good move, Denki said. If a move saves your life in a villain fight, you should use it. I guess, Yarurozo said slowly. I still find it a bit distasteful. Denki shrugged. Uraraka had finally found the basement, but since the lights were off, she seemed hesitant to go down. He wasn't sure if she thought it was empty or a trap, but it wasn't until Bakugo appeared at the end of the hall that she dropped down and started searching, only to be targeted by Ida almost immediately. She looked around frantically for something to use her quirk on, but Ida had entirely cleared the floor, so basically she was just trying to dodge a speed quirk in a confined space. After a few moments, she apparently got fed up and tried to use her quirk on herself to make it past him, but of course, Bakugo chose that exact moment to join a fight and knock her out of the air like he was spiking a volleyball, which of course gave Ida all the opening he needed to grab her and wrap her in capture tape. The villains win, Omid announced, then turned to the rest of the students. So, class, what did you think? Did we have a MVP? Bakugo, Tsu answered immediately. He immediately used his knowledge of our classmates' quirk to create a strategy against them, and he wasn't afraid to do what was necessary to apprehend them. He also became one with the darkness, Tokiyami said seriously. He was willing to fully embrace the shadows and play the part of a villain. Actually, I think he does that even when he's not playing the villain. Todoroki spoke up. He's an informant for the police, so I think he's used to being around dangerous people and situations. He's what? Hagakure exclaimed. That's so manly. Kirishima had his fists together. Look out, bro. I've helped him fight villains already. That's so cool, Denki breathed. Bakugo had helped Uraraka to her feet and had done the capture tape while Ida went to go free Inasa. He even walked her out of the building. Most people had stopped watching the screens by now, so they missed it when Bakugo suddenly froze and shot a small blast at the wall, leaving behind a scorch mark like it was nothing as Uraraka hurried after him. Hagakure was the only one Denki saw give a barely noticeable flinch, and nobody else mentioned it, so I figured Bakugo was probably just blowing off some extra energy, or maybe he was just like that. Denki felt his own quirk coming through his body and realized he could go for blowing off some steam himself. He was really glad his fight was next. No one else is going to be able to get away with hiding in the basement the whole time, Ochako pointed out. Now that everyone's seen it, our classmates will know how to check. Bakugo shrugged. Even if the entrance had been obvious, it still would have been the most effective place to keep Inasa from just blowing the weapon away. How did you even plan around our quirks like that? Ochako asked. I mean, we've known each other for, a day. Planning around your opponent's quirk is just common sense, Cheeks. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Anything else is just idiotic and... He trailed off, and Ochako followed his gaze to see a bee buzz past them and land on the wall. Did YOOOO keep beehives? She'd remembered seeing a few of them at the entrance exam, so it might be one of the support course's projects. She was just about to ask, but before she even had a chance to react, Bakugo had exploded the poor insect to smithereens. What had it ever done to him? Bakugo caught her staring and huffed before walking away. Don't trust the bees, Cheeks. You never know which queen they're reporting to. Ooh, this chapter was really good. It was a long chapter. But we got to see Bakugo strategizing and fighting. And then the bee at the end. And Denki's reaction to seeing the bee on the screen. But anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed chapter 83 of Viridian the Green Guide. And I'll see you all next time. Bye! Hey, outtakes. Eat this! Yes! They eat this! Yes!